record. Hello, Hot Springs Village Audubon Society. I'm very excited with our speaker we have for you today. This is Emily Stubblefield. Emily is a 2017 graduate of the University of Arkansas at Fort Smith. She graduated with a criminal justice bachelor's degree with a minor in political science. And she's always had this passion for working with people and working outside. And so when she was an interpreter while in college at the Fort Smith National Historic Site, and then joined the Arkansas State Parks on a seasonal basis at the Gray Lake Resort in 2019. So Emily is now, with that experience, a full-time interpreter at Lake Ouachita State Park. And she enjoys camping and being outdoors and also hiking through our other state and national parks. So she has a lot in common with a lot of our members here. And for those of you who aren't aware where Lake Ouachita State Park is, I encourage you to visit it. It's you would take the road right across from the home plate and drive. It's about 10 or 12 minutes away, and go to a stop sign. Just look right. You'll see the entrance to the park right there. Take a right. It takes you right to the visitor center they have there. A couple of beaches they have. They have some very interesting boat ramp, camping, full marina. And what we're going to hear about today that's also located at that same park is the Three Sister Springs. A lot of history there, and I encourage you to, we take guests there to see it. And Emily is going to enlighten us about the history that the springs has. We know that Hot Springs has a deep history in the healing waters. So Emily, thank you for joining us this morning.
Sure, absolutely. Well, thank you.
We're excited to hear about this great feature that you have here at the Lake Ouachita State Park.
Thank you. As like Michael said, my name is Emily Stubblefield. I'm the head interpreter here at Lake Ouachita State Park. What most people don't realize when they come or hear about the park at Lake Ouachita, they associate the state park being completely associated with the lake. And that's the main resource here. But what a lot of people don't realize is the purpose of why Lake Ouachita State Park was created. And it happens to do with our only historical aspect of the park, which is the Three Sisters Springs, located near the lake. But the springs has been around for many, many years, way before the lake was even a thought. And so that's what we're going to dive deep into today. It's pretty interesting when you think about how long the springs have been here and how they have evolved throughout the history from what they were when they were discovered in the 1800s to how they're interpreted today. So we'll get going. So as Michael mentioned, Hot Springs has always kind of been known for kind of having magical healing properties with the hot waters. And this is has this thought and these beliefs have been around for many years, even back in ancient times. It's thought throughout history that these natural waters and natural springs have held an important role, and it's to this day it kind of holds a mystic wonder to those that come visit. And so people have regarded both the hot and cold springs that have different medicinal or healing properties. And we'll talk about that more in detail as we progress. But you'll hear people talk about more in the hot springs, you know, this fountain or this spring cures this ailment, or I use this water for this particular thing. And that that belief has carried on generation after generation. The Three Sister Springs, however, here at Lake Ouachita State Park has played an important role in the past, and it still continues to play an important role today. So flipping back, I need you to use your imagination here. Again, we're via Zoom. 2020 has been a little crazy. So just use your imagination. If you've been to Lake Ouachita before, please try to imagine the park without a lake. I know that's difficult because the lake is one of the main headliners here at the park. But if you can use your imagination and try to picture the park without a lake, I'll try to paint you a picture as best I can. What we're looking at is the rolling hills and mountains of the Ouachita National Forest. The Ouachita River would eventually feed the Lake Ouachita, but it would be the river being the main body of water through this area. This area was not made ideal for agricultural purposes. You're not going to have a lot of luck growing big plots of gardens and vegetables out here. The landscape is just not made that way. And so this area was mostly for hunter-gatherers. And so that's what enticed people to come this way. And so keep that in mind as we continue on. The park will eventually develop into what we see now, but keep that scene in your head as we go through. We're going to jump to medicine real quick. So when we have a slight ache or pain, the first thing we do typically after we try to figure out what's caused it, is it stress? Is it not drinking enough water? Is it more caffeine or less caffeine? You know, we associate that with go to the cabinet, in the medicine cabinet, grabbing maybe ibuprofen or aspirin, or Tylenol, whatever we can do to immediately fix that uncomfortableness, right? And so if we go back in time, that wasn't always necessarily the route you had to go, right? You didn't always have ibuprofen or Advil or Aleve in your cabinet. What you would have might be these untraditional methods, right? I've heard stories and you know, we go to the doctor now, for some people more frequent than others, but if we go back in time, the doctor wasn't always the easiest, most convenient or affordable option, right? You had to have a doctor close by. You had to be able to afford the house call. And then, you know, what if he didn't come in time, right? We're not traveling by car anymore at this time. And so you had to take all these factors into consideration. So people knew this, right? People understood that this way of getting medical care wasn't always easy or convenient or quick. And so they had common peddlers come through. For those that don't know what a peddler are, it would be today's equivalent to a vacuum cleaner salesman come to your house, right? I don't want that Kirby Rainbow vacuum. When I tell this to kids, they're like, I don't under. So anyway, yes, if you understand what a door-to-door vacuum salesman is, it would be kind of the equivalent, right? Show you really how dirty your carpet is. So these peddlers would come out to different houses in the area and try to sell residents these miracle drugs. Many times these miracle drugs, however, were nothing more than sugar pills or candy disguised as pills, right? And they might say, hello, good sir, you know, it looks like you're awfully tired today. I have these lovely peppy pills. For just 10 cents a bottle, they can be yours and you'll never have to drink another cup of coffee in your life, and really sell it to you, right? And then you realize after he's long gone and taken your money that you've been conned or scammed and that there's nothing but sugar, right? And so people would try to come up with non-traditional medical practices to try to help aid them on certain elements. We've probably all heard some wise tales or tricks we've heard passed down from our grandparents or great-grandparents or previous generations, you know, that they thought might aid us when we get sick or injured. You know, a common one is chicken noodle soup, right? That's the most common one we've heard throughout our whole life. Some of these, you know, work, or at least temporarily work or trick us enough to work, while others we've heard might not work so much at all. Michael, I know it's just me and you on this call, but can you remember any that you've heard growing up?
Well, certainly chicken soup for a cold.
Absolutely, right?
They use, you know, castor oil, cod liver oil. Those were all remedies.
Did they work?
questionable. As a small child, you weren't sure what worked. You probably just your normal immune system
Right.
was the best defense, you know.
Absolutely. And so during this time, science has progressed. And so while many of these practices were at their peak, people didn't understand why they worked or why they didn't work. They just knew they worked. We were continuing that practice because something in this concoction or something in this method cured it, right? Or benefited us. And so as science progressed, we have now learned kind of the magic behind some of these non-traditional medical practices. For example, you know, when you burn your hand, it's not uncommon to put a cold rag on it, right? That's something we still do today. That was a practice they had taken back, you know, run cold water over it. Some of the funny ones that I talk to kids about what are for young men trying to grow a big luscious beard. One of the ones, one of the remedies they gave was you take your working boots, you put them in a bucket and you boil them, and then you drink the boiled boot water. Now, I don't know if that would give you a luscious beard or not. It would definitely give you hair in your chest, but I don't know about your face. Another one is talking about if you have asthma, to cure it, you just eat lots of carrots. Now, we know that's probably not true. But another one people don't associate with this type of thing, but it's been around for years and we still associate today when you think about Halloween, is garlic, right? Garlic has been had the association of you know, getting rid of evil things or bad juju, whatever you want to put it, right? For many different reasons. I don't know if it's the stink, because if you smell like garlic, you're definitely not going to have anybody around you, right? And so there were just different ones like that helped. Another one I talk about is honey and apple cider vinegar. If you had real bad acne breakouts during this time, well, honey has natural properties, and then apple cider vinegar is antibacterial, right? Now we know that. They might not have understood the antibacterial properties in apple cider vinegar. And so no wonder it cleared up your skin, right? Or had the potential to clear up your skin because of these natural properties that that benefited, right? So science has come a long way today that they might not have realized in the past. So how does the Three Sister Springs relate to all of this? And so, you know, as I mentioned before, in the 1800s, hot springs became a popular stop for people seeking a cure or relief from the ailments they had. These springs even held high properties and high regard from Native Americans who had been coming to them for many years. So the Three Sisters Springs have, a lengthy timeline here. We're going to start in 1875 with a gentleman named John McFadden. He was a homesteader looking for a place to settle with his family. And as a homesteader, again, keep that scene in your mind about no lake here at the time. We had rigorous up and down Ouachita mountains, maybe rocky soil where you can't plant a lot of crops. And so what are you looking for when you homestead? You're looking for, you know, a place to have shelter, right? A place where you can gather food for your family. But the most important one is going to be a water source, right? And Mr. McFadden stumbled upon this area of land, which wasn't too far from the Ouachita River. But the best benefit of all is he stumbled upon these 3 naturally flowing springs. These springs were about 10 to 11.5 miles apart in the kind of the shape of a triangle. And he felt like he had kind of hit gold in a sense. He had 3 daughters, and how the local legend goes is he named the 3 springs Three Sisters after his 3 daughters. So the reason he thought he had really hit it big with these springs is because hot springs at this time was booming, right? You had a great big tourism industry, and a lot of people were coming for these springs beneficial properties. And he thought, well, my springs are cold, but they're also coming from the ground, so they surely have some of the same healing properties, right? And so he started to spread the word that he felt that his springs also had similar properties and would share similar benefits to the hot springs just a few miles south of him. People eventually started to gather and soak in the cold springs, bathe in the cold springs, drink in the cold springs. And at the time, because the water was constantly flowing out of the springs, they started to pool together and make these large clear pools with the spring water. And so people would gather around these pools and soak and drink. McFadden had this property for 8 years. He kind of saw the writing on the wall. He failed to meet all the guidelines for his homesteading act and for actually didn't get around to building a house. And so he sold his 240 acres to a gentleman named John Mooney for a saddle and a mare. When the Mooneys acquired it, they were then kind of called, the springs were then called McFadden Springs by the locals. The Moonies had this area for just a short period of time. They actually lived in hot springs and managed some of the bathhouses down on downtown, but they came back to this area in the summer and lived and managed the springs down here. But because he only worked during the summer in this area, he needed the supplemental income, and he sold it to Robert Hill to supplement the money, supplement their income, excuse me. And so in between McFadden and Mooney, the springs became known as McFadden or the Three Sisters Springs. This gentleman is pretty important in the springs role. His name is W.M. Cecil, or I'm just going to refer to him as Mr. Cecil throughout this program. And he was a businessman. He was pretty smart when it came to seeing potential in what the springs had. And he saw that people were starting to gather and had been gathering and staying at the pools and camping near the pools of the spring water while he acquired the land. And he thought, well, if people are going to stay here to try to get the benefit of the water as long as they can, I'm going to make this as profitable for me as I can. So he ended up buying out of his investors. So he was the sole owner, and he began building cabins around the springs. He even got into building a spring house and a bottling station. There's two remaining historical buildings here at Lake Ouachita. They've been renovated since this, but one was the old visitor center that Cecil had built for this resort, and one of the original cabins is still in place. The rest of them you can see either foundations or places that they were, but we still have two of the original buildings standing today. Anyway, so C.W. Cecil saw the potential in the springs. He saw where people bought into this, whether that was true or not true. He was there to make $1 off of it. And people, the reason they stayed near the springs is because they thought if I drink it once, it might not work. If I drink it twice, that's not giving it enough time to do its thing. But if I camp here for 3 months and bathe in it every day and drink it every day, then that's going to give the water time to have its magical properties and play a role on my body and what's going on with it. And so that's the reason the cabins were so popular. And so he really got into it. Like I said, built a bottling plant, and he actually would bottle his water. And because we're virtual, but it's a little bottle, and he would bottle it and sell it for 10 cents a bottle in 1920. And I try to relate that to kids, but it's very expensive back in that day for just a small bottle of water. These are some of the pictures from the Cecil era when he had the springs. And Cecil was smart. He understood that people believed, or, each spring had different, they all contain the same minerals, but they all contain different concentration amounts of those minerals, which I thought was pretty interesting. And because each spring contained different concentrations, it was said that each spring would cure different things. So if you had one element, you might not go to spring 1, you might go to spring 3. And so what he would do on his bottles is he would actually stamp a number at the bottom of the bottle to tell the customer, oh, that came from spring 3. That's going to help cure this ailment. And so these are the signs of the display. So like, for example, this bottle has a stamp number 3. And so it would help with diabetic sores, eczema, sore eyes, head and nose sinuses. The thing that always kind of cracks me up a little bit is, so if you look at springs number 2, it'll help you with low blood pressure, right? If you look at spring number 1, it'll help you with low or high blood pressure. So I guess I'm not sure who came up with what springs will help you with what, but I always find that kind of comical. And it's very interesting to me on what springs will cure, what each spring and their unique properties people have thought would cure specific diseases or ailments. And we still have people, this water was found by the FDA that it did not meet the Safe Drinking Water Act standards in the 60s. But as I tell people when we have this program in person, these springs have been drank from for many years. And I can't tell you to drink it, but I can just tell you that many people have drank it for many years and been all right. And so we still have people today, we advise against it, but we still have many people today come to the park with water jugs and milk jugs and jars and fill up from each spring because of their unique properties. So going back to Mr. Cecil's timeline, he enjoyed what he did. He made a very good living from it, but he was ready to step out of business. And so he sold it to a gentleman out of Chicago named Roy Whipple in 1939. Spring forward a little bit, it was bought from Mr. Whipple in 1951 by the Army Corps of Engineers. They were seeing the area that was in need of flood control help. The Ouachita River, the water level varies drastically. And so they saw a need for putting a dam and making this area into a lake to help with flood control and to help with hydroelectric power. So Army Corps of Engineers came in, started the construction of damming the lake, and made the construction of Blakely Dam. And in 1955, the Army Corps of Engineers, this area of the lake was kind of unmanned, unstationed, and the Army Corps of Engineers, fortunately, saw the benefit of holding on and maintaining and protecting this historic aspect of the lake. And they didn't have anybody to maintain it or protect it. And they reached out to the state of Arkansas and said, hey, would you be interested in making this a state park? We'd be more than happy to lease you the land if you'll just promise to maintain and keep up this and preserve this historic monument and area. And so 1965, Lake Ouachita was established as a state park. This is me and my dog. But yes, 1965 is when Lake Ouachita was established as a state park. In between 1951 and today, these are a few buildings that were there but are no longer here. You can see remnants of them. The building in the bottom left corner near the water was actually a restaurant C.W. Cecil had built. It then burned in 1986, but you can still see the remnants of the stairs, and that same utility pole is actually there, believe it or not, with charred marks all over it. And I believe this was a cabin, but this was on the bottom of the hill near the springs. If you ever get a chance, the stairs are still there. They just lead up to nothing now. But the building was eventually condemned and tore down in the 90s. So the springs today, the healing waters of the Three Sisters Springs brought many people here and have had an important role in our past. That's still a significant part of our future. It brought many people in here that depended on the waters and brought change to this area. A lot of the locals who grew up in this area don't refer to this area as Lake Ouachita State Park. They only refer to it as Three Sisters Springs. So not being from this area of Arkansas and then coming over to Lake Ouachita, when I would answer the phone, it took me a few times to get used to people saying, I need to make a campsite at Three Sisters Springs. And I would say, no, this is Lake Ouachita State Park. And they said, yes, I know, I need to make a reservation at Three Sisters Springs. So it took me a minute to realize that this was the area of the lake that they were talking about, because the springs had become associated so fondly with this side of the lake. But I hope to answer any questions you might have, and we hope that you can come out to Lake Ouachita State Park to see the springs and exhibit for yourself.
Thank you, Emily. I've been there a few times and taken guests there, and it does really stimulate your imagination. I know you have some graphics there at the springs that shows where some of the cabins were located.
Yes.
And it was really interesting because I'd never thought about the lake not being there and what that area looked like without the lake, because there's actually a beach and the lake is right there by the springs.
Right. It's very hard, even for us who have been here for a while, to imagine, because that, with the name like Ouachita, it's, it's, but you have to think about the Ouachita Mountains you see away from the lake. That's exactly what it would have looked like.
Yeah, it would have been a difficult spot to even approach or get to by horse and buggy.
Right, absolutely.
But thank you for this great presentation today. I hope our membership will take the 12 minutes or so to drive over and maybe pack a picnic lunch and spend some time over. Come see you at the visitor center over there and say hi to you while they're there.
Absolutely.
There are some hiking trails, an amphitheater, a lot of good. You can rent boats and things there as well.
Yes, sir. We have weekend programs now. They have finally released the majority of our COVID guidelines now. We got notified a few days ago that our boat tours are now happening again. Okay. So you can check the website at arkansasstateparks.com/Lake Ouachita to look at our upcoming events and programs such as boat tours, more in-person Three Sisters Springs talks, hikes. We have a variety of programs we offer to the public.
Yes. Thank you again, Emily. And if you ever hear about 240 acres being for sale for a horse and saddle, let me know.
Will do.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks.